Hello, I'm tntulak, and this is Filmmakering Like a Boss. Now, I don't claim to be an expert, but I am an award-winning filmmaker, and more than that, I have a passion for filmmaking, which is really all you need to get started. In the last couple episodes, we've talked about how to direct attention and how to misdirect attention, so this episode we're going to talk about how to change attention. This is where you direct the audience to pay attention to one subject in the shot, and then change their attention to another subject in the same shot. Now, as I mentioned in the misdirecting techniques episode, the best way to do this is to use multiple attention directing techniques and assign each subject a different one. And to do that, you really just need to get creative. But in this episode, I'm specifically going to talk about how to change attention using depth of field, which is basically the distance between what is in focus and what is out of focus within the same shot. So if you have two subjects in your shot and you want your audience to pay attention to one of them for a moment and then to the other one, and you want to use depth of field to do this, you would use a technique called rack focus, which is when the focus actually physically changes in the shot from one subject to another. From one subject to the other. Here's a few examples from some of my short films.
They're somewhere in this building. So what do you want to do?
We proceed. My name is Federico.
He's battling cancer.
This technique is one of the most common techniques. You see it all the time. In fact, of everything that I've said, this is the one you're most likely to have already known. So instead of suggesting how to creatively use this technique, I'm going to explain how to physically do this technique. Though I'm not going to get too deep into the technical aspects of how it works, because I want this show to be more like creative inspiration and not so much technical how-to. That being said, this is a camera trick, and how can you use it creatively if you don't know how to do it? First, you want to be zoomed in as much as you can get. The more zoomed in, the longer the lens, the higher the or millimeter number, the better results you'll get. Second, you want to have some distance between your subjects. The further apart they are, the better results you'll get. Also, the closer they are to the camera, the less far apart your subjects have to be. Third, you have to set the camera settings accordingly. There are three main settings on your camera: the ISO, the shutter speed, and the fan just turned off, which is good for sound. The ISO, the shutter speed, and the f-stop. The one you want to focus on for this is the f-stop. Pretend that the F in f-stop stands for focus. And you can basically think about it like that, like this is the focus setting. The lower the number the f-stop is set to, the more depth of field you'll get, and the more things will be out of focus. The higher the number, the less depth of field you'll get, and the more things will be in focus. For example, this shot you're looking at right now, I'm using a 50mm prime lens, which means it's always zoomed in to 50mm. It's like 3 or 4 feet away from me, and I can't even reach it, and it's zoomed in to get this shot right here. It also, this lens gets down to an f-stop of 1.8. And because my f-stop is so low, I'm able to get this beautiful depth of field shot where I'm in focus and my background is all out of focus. Now watch what happens when I change the f-stop setting. Now everything is in focus. I've gone from an f-stop setting of 1.8 to 11. All of a sudden, now notice, you can actually see the stuff in my background. You can actually see my LaBAFA Member of the Month award. You can see my director chair. You can see the DVDs on the shelf behind me. The Doctor's Fez and my Sonic Spork. It's all suddenly there. Now be aware that when you change the f-stop setting, as the number goes up, your shot gets darker and darker. So you have to adjust the ISO and the shutter speed accordingly. I've pushed, in order to get this shot looking decent, I've pushed my ISO all the way up as high as I can get it on this camera, which is, I can't remember off the top of my head. Hold on. 6400, which explains why in some of the darker areas of my background here, you can see a lot of grain and noise. I would normally avoid that, but I'm proving a point here, so there it is. So now that you've got your subjects set up and your camera settings are right, your f-stop's as low as you can get it, now all you gotta do is turn the focus ring. Now when you're doing this, you definitely wanna make sure that when you turn the focus ring, you get both subjects in focus. it can be very difficult to eyeball your focus setting on a very small camera monitor as you're turning the focus ring. For that reason, you want to try to use a follow focus of some kind. Some cameras have an auto follow focus setting, some cameras have a auto rack focus option, and some lenses have a built-in follow focus meter like this right here, where you can set your 2 focus points and then just watch the meter as you're changing the focus and see where it sets to. I don't know how well you can see that in the camera here. Now, if you don't have a camera with cool fancy auto settings, or you don't have a lens with a built-in follow focus, you can get a follow focus online for pretty cheap that will strap to the lens that you do have, allowing you to set marker points for your 2 focus settings. So when you do go to change the focus ring, you can just move from one point to the other point without having to eyeball it. And failing that, I suggest you kind of just practice. You don't even have to record, but turn your camera on, point it at something, and practice eyeballing the focus ring. Get used to which direction to turn the ring to focus closer or further away. Now, if you have a camera that doesn't have a manual focus ring or any manual focus adjustment settings of any kind, then you can't really adjust the focus manually. But you already knew that. So here's what you do. It most likely, in fact, definitely has an autofocus setting of some kind. So practice with it. Figure out how it works. When I shot my award-winning short film, The Ketchup Kid, I filmed it on a Sony Webby Handycam, which is like the most basic Handycam you can get. It had no manual settings of any kind except for zoom, meaning that it had an auto follow focus in it. It only cost me $100, and I used it to make YouTube videos with for an entire year. Then I shot The Ketchup Kid with it, and I won first place. I used the prize money to buy this camera that I'm filming on right now. I figured out that the autofocus sensor was based on movement. So in order to pull off this rack shot, I had the actor in the foreground stand perfectly still, while the actor in the background swayed back and forth as he walked, tricking the camera's autofocus sensor into turning on the fan for background noise and to doing the rack focus shot. The reason that I point this out is to show that it doesn't matter the equipment that you have. It doesn't matter if you're filming on a $3,000 DSLR or a $100 Handycam. If you want to be a filmmaker, all you have to do is pick up a camera and make a film. Also, click that subscribe button so you can learn more tricks while you follow along on the next episode of Filmmakering Like a Boss. Here at the end screen, I would like to invite you to see some of my filmmakering in action by clicking on one of these links over here. I would also like to invite you to visit our Patreon page and consider supporting Easily Amused Group Productions on Patreon. And thank you for watching the Easily Amused Group, the show that killed the radio star in my mind and in my car.